Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode number 71 of the Board Game Barrage podcast. I am your best host, Neelan, and with me, as always, are Mark and Kellen, my co-hosts. How are you guys doing?
Hello, hello, hello.
There it is, the signature Kellen intro.
Yeah, he's at a level 3, so strap in. I'm a little hoarse from yesterday. I was yelling in celebration as my team, Liverpool, became champions of Europe, winning the Champions League. One thing I love about board games over like watching sports is like with board games, you have control over your ability to win. And one thing that's always frustrated me, like watching sports, is like you get so invested in a team and you have nothing to do with their outcome.
Right.
So over the years, I've been able to like compartmentalize that and like not be so into watching my teams win or lose. Like if they lose, I'm usually like, okay, and I'll just like let it go because I couldn't do anything. But still, it's so nice when your team wins like a really big trophy or a big competition. So yeah, I was screaming and shouting. Yeah.
Well, congrats.
Yes.
Congrats to Liverpool.
I did well yesterday.
Congratulations, Mark. You're a champion.
I am a champion. I always felt like a champion, but it feels good to be
It's
validated.
Acknowledgement.
Yeah.
Exactly.
That's right.
Okay, this episode is going to be a top 5 episode. It's been a while since we've done one of these. And what we thought we would do for this one is talk about games that, for whatever reason, we thought we were going to hate. So we saw the theme, we saw the name, we saw the mechanics. We thought maybe this game's definitely not going to be for me, but for some way we've played it and we're completely turned around in it. That is our featured topic for this week, and that's going to be coming up later in the episode. But before we get there, let's talk about the games that we've been playing. And Mark, do you want to start us off?
Sure. Neelan and I played one of the Uwe Rosenberg Tetramino games, Indian Summer. Where does that fall in terms of like chronology? Do you know?
You know what? I actually don't know.
Because there's Cottage Garden.
I think
Indian
Cottage
Summer.
Garden was first.
Okay.
But I actually don't know that for sure.
Isn't there a third one?
Some
Right after Canadian Spring.
Oh, no, isn't it? It is a spring though.
It's some Spring Meadow.
Spring Meadow.
Spring Meadow.
Which I don't know anything about, really.
Yeah, me either.
Yeah. So I have played Cottage Garden. Indian Summer, I was worried that it was going to be a little too similar because stylistically and, both of them being Tetramino, sort of you get the sense that they're going to be the same. But this struck me as quite different. In Indian Summer, what you're trying to do is you've got your own grid in front of you, and the goal of the game is the first person to cover their grid wins. In an effort to cover the grid, you are taking tiles off of sort of a conveyor in front of you. You've got 5 tiles to start. After you place the 5, then you take another 5 from the conveyor and try to place those and then get another 5. Along the way, some of these tiles have little holes in them, and your board has aspects printed on it. Like there are blueberries, there are nuts, there are feathers, and there are something else outdoorsy.
The rules describe them as treasures, which I
that's nature's treasures.
Yeah,
so
exactly.
So strewn about your board are nature's treasures. And what you're trying to do is you're trying to, if you can, place your Tetramino pieces on your board. All the Tetramino pieces have holes on them. You're trying to place them on your board in such a way that the nature's treasure that's printed on your board is visible. And if it is, then you put that treasure, I keep saying treasure, on your board. It's a little chit you place on your board. And once you have filled that quadrant that includes the now covered treasure, you get it, you acquire it. So you don't acquire it right away. You acquire it once you've covered the rest of that sort of section of the board. And then you can cash in these treasures to allow you to take powers that sort of breaks the rules of the game. So yeah, that's basically how Indian Summer works. And like I said, it is very different than at least Cottage Garden, and obviously it's quite different than Feast for Odin,
or even Patchwork.
Patchwork,
that's
right? Yes,
pretty different from that too.
So if that kept you away, which it did for me, I sort of didn't really research Indian Summer because I thought it would be too similar. Fear not. However, I think I don't know. I think I like this less than Cottage Garden, although it's tough to say. And one of the reasons why I feel like I might like it more is the fact that we were able to play 2 games of it, including the rules, in about hour, 15 minutes.
Well, but even less than that.
Yeah,
I would
less
say
than
like,
that.
they were about 20 minutes a game at best, I
so
think.
3 players, including rules, 2 games in less than an hour. It was remarkable.
Don't you guys track how long each game
Yeah.
takes?
We could
so
look this up if we wanted to like pull up our phone. And
I forgot how much you appreciated it.
Yeah.
So let's
do
stop
it. Let's
this.
get
Let's
the
stop this
accuracy.
podcast. Dead stop.
We'll be back in 5 minutes.
How
once
long this thing ran for? No.
I mean, you collect the data, bro. I don't know.
Yeah, if this is
21
not what
minutes
it's
for the first game, 15 minutes for the second game.
Yeah, that's
So 36 minutes, not including the rules, but the rules were another 15
But
minutes.
earlier you mentioned an hour 15.
Yeah.
So that, what was it, 21 and 15?
Yeah.
Do you know what that adds to?
That's the 36. Yeah.
it's maths.
Yeah, we had dinner in between.
Right.
So what are you going to say to that now? Were you there? I forgot. Were you there? No,
Yeah.
because you weren't invited. So maybe you should stay out of this conversation. Wait till your game comes up. Anyway, so yeah, I loved how quick it went.
Yeah.
The one thing about it, though, that was interesting, but also while you are placing the pieces on the board, you're being very efficient. You're placing the pieces and you're covering a lot of your surface area, right? But there gets to a point very quickly in this game where you're probably going to be unable to use the Tetris pieces anymore, and you're going to be reliant on basically what you can do is you can pass a turn and place a little squirrel tile, which is like a 1x1. So you're always able to place those. So towards the end of the game, and again, the end comes quick because this whole game is quick, there is a lot of, I'm just going to place a squirrel tile. Or you're cashing in the nature's treasures to place squirrel tiles, which is one of the powers. So it's sort of weird, and it was sort of off-putting very early, getting to a point where you could no longer place the pieces and you were forced to just do these passing moves. And, you were able to sort of combo the powers so that you were able to end the game quickly. But it went from like being very efficient and like interesting and like placing the pieces to being very inefficient and very restricted. And
my take on that was, and this was very apparent having played 2 games in quick succession. Our first game, I think we both said, it's like, well, I'm not quite sure about that. It felt a little bit like weird, like a little bit functory, like you're just going through the motions.
Yeah.
But then the second game was so much more interesting. Like once you realize the momentum of collecting treasures and cashing them out appropriately, like I can see this being the game that you sort of learn how to play it substantially better, right? Obviously the whole game is, okay, I'm gearing towards the end game. Am I going to be able to work all of my tiles into this? And it's, like I said, it's easy to build yourself into a corner on the first game of it, but I almost felt even by the second game, we were all doing substantially better at it, right?
And even as like when I was having my worst feeling, and again, to be clear, even when I was feeling the worst about this game, I didn't dislike it. I just was trying to figure out where it stacked up.
Yeah.
But even at its worst, it just goes so fast, and you do have a lot of interesting decisions that it's not a game I would ever pass up a game of. Like if anybody ever suggested it, it's so fast and it's still interesting that I would always play it.
I've been trying to figure out, like, again, my Cottage Garden and Indian Summer ranking of the two of them, because they feel the most similar. Patchwork, I feel, is substantially different because it's a smaller 2-player game. Yeah. I don't feel as excited, weirdly enough, to play Cottage Garden as I do Indian Summer. And that's the game that wasn't my reaction on the night. Sure. I thought that Cottage Garden felt like a more interesting, intricate game, but it's also like about an hour long.
Yeah, that's true.
Right?
That's true.
Indian Summer just felt so breezy and great for being a very similar game. And that's actually the one thing I want to stress is he's doing a lot of work with this one mechanic that makes games. He's making games that feel substantially different while having the same, basic mechanic in them. It's pretty impressive.
Are you ready for it?
Yeah.
Bring it.
Here's my idea. Battle of the Tetrominoes. So this is where the theme music comes in. So I'm going to da-na-na-na-na. Okay. We're all sitting at a desk dressed as sportscasters.
Love it already.
Okay. We have a giant chart.
Okay.
Just like March Madness, and then we have a vote off, and this is perfect because there's 3 of us.
Right.
And 2 out of 3 sends one back, and then we declare a winner of Battle of the Tetrominoes.
Is there any non-Rosenberg game in this?
Baron Park.
Baron Park, yeah.
Okay.
And it's going to basically be...
Tetris is the one seed. Tetris is the one seed.
And Nealon is just going to be trying to get Feast for Odin to win, and then you and I are going to plot against it.
All right, I like it.
Boom.
Let's do it.
I want to close up by saying one thing, because you did remind me of this. I think this strictly beats Baron Park for me, which is a game I really, really liked, but I found this better. They're actually more similar than the other Rosenberg games. Those feel like the 2 that have the most in common, and I thought Indian Summer was better.
Dr. Uwe just looked over at Baron Park and was like, you can't steal my idea.
Yeah.
What is the theme, though, right?
You're walking through a forest, clearing, placing leaves, as you do, collecting nature's treasures.
Yeah, easy. Perfect. I mean, it is sort of redone, the whole nature's treasures thing. It feels like
I feel like it's used 100 times before.
Yeah.
But it's an interesting spin on it.
That's right. That was Indian Summer by the one and only Uwe Rosenberg.
So I played a game called Richard the Lionheart. This is by Simon. I think it is a 2017. It's a pretty recent release, I think. And it's interesting because you look at the box and you sort of look at the miniatures and you sort of have in your mind what sort of style game this is, especially coming from Simon, but it's nothing like you might be imagining. It's a team versus team, sort of social, but not really social deduction at all. You know up front who all your teammates are. So let's say in a 6-player game, there are 3 people on the green team and 3 people on the red team who have already forgotten thematically who they are. King Richard and King John. So this is set in the time of the Crusades in the Robin Hood sort of narrative. So one team is sort of the Robin Hood allegiance.
Are they actually Robin Hood?
Yeah, no, one of the characters is Robin Hood.
You said
Friar
sort
Tuck.
of Robin Hood.
Well, I'm trying to remember if there's anyone else that isn't just like the Merry Men. So say one team is Robin Hood, Maid Marian, Friar Tuck, and the other teams are Prince John supporters. So the Sheriff of Nottingham, Prince John himself, I think, and other people I'm forgetting.
Yeah, right.
Anyway, so you know up front which team you're on, and you're working with your team by moving your figure around the map, collecting cards that represent different sort of provisions. So you're either collecting a king card in your color, a chess card in your color, or a treasure card in your color. And you use those cards to influence this vote at the end of each round. And that vote is sort of like Battlestar Galactica style, where you each submit a number of cards and you reveal them all at the end. And depending on what comes out, different figures advance down these different tracks. So if there are more green king cards than red king cards, then the green team's figure moves down this track. If there are more treasure chest cards in one color than the other, then that figure moves down the track. And if any one of these figures reaches the end of their track, then that team is now eligible to win and the game ends. But you don't win as a team, because in amongst everything else you're doing, you're collecting victory points, and only one person from that team ends up winning the game. So you're sort of trying to help your team win, but then also subversively collect victory points to be the actual only winner on your team, which I thought was a really interesting concept, because it sort of has these element of semi-co-op to it. It has this element of team versus team social deduction, so trying to figure out what the right thing to play is. But for whatever reason, it didn't really sort of like work as well as those games in that genre I liked. You've played this as well, Mark, right?
Yeah. Well, I think the social deduction or the deduction element comes from the fact that all players are dealt out these edict cards. And so the edict cards give you bonus victory points if you're able to have the game state in a certain way at the end of the game. So there are two tracks that will signal the green team's winning, and there are two tracks signaling the red team's winning. So your card may say, you're on the green team, you want to win with this track activating rather than the other one. So your team may be winning, but they may be going down the track you don't want them to go down. So then, everybody's saying, hey, let's push for a victory down track A. And you may be saying, oh yeah, sure, let's do that. But then you're contributing cards that are not doing that in order to stall that lane and push the other lane. Yeah, I agree that it's weird. It's sort of like, I think sort of the novelty of what it is almost enough for me to recommend it, because it is a sort of weird hybrid social deduction, Euro, this push and pull thing where you're going down different tracks, tug of warring. It's sort of like an interesting, not what you expect sort of game.
So let me clarify. You can only win individually if you're on the winning team.
Correct.
But a whole team can win as well?
No. There's only one player
There's one
wins.
winner, and you must be on the winning team.
Yeah, exactly. So the first thing that happens is one team wins, and then of the people on that team, whoever has the most victory points is the single winner of the game.
Because it sort of sounds like a much lighter version of A Study in Emerald, which uses a lot of similar thoughts in the semi-co-op space.
Yeah, which I haven't played.
Yeah, that's true. It's a substantially different game in just that it's much lighter and much simpler. The one element of it I haven't described is the main mechanic is almost like this hand management system where you're sort of going around collecting cards, and you kind of want cards of your color, but you also want to spend them in order to get victory points. So you're trying to collect sets or combinations of cards that you can trade for more and better cards. There are like other things you can buy with money along the way. So there are interesting, like you said, Mark, Euro trappings in the middle, but it's extremely light, and it feels more incidental to the I want my team to win in this way so that I end up with more points.
This sounds really interesting. I wish it wasn't so boring of a theme.
Yeah, actually, that's a good point, because I think that the much better version of this in my eyes is one that just has a much more exciting board. When I saw the box and when I heard the name, I was just imagining dry Euro, and it's not really that at all. Like, I think it definitely doesn't do itself any favors by presenting in that way. Yeah, I can imagine a bunch of different themes that would be much more fun.
And this game plays actually pretty well with odd number players. I guess you didn't play with odd.
No, I didn't. Okay. And actually, I had been told that because, like I was just describing, in even teams, it plays out just the way I described. I've heard that with an odd number of players, then some people are neutral players.
Yeah, so in odd number of players, there are neutral players, and the neutral player must ally with one side or the other at the beginning of every round. They have edict cards where they want, instead of one lane to win, they want a marker to end up in a specific sort of location. Mm-hmm. And also, the neutral player, I believe, wins automatically if the game ends on the clock.
Okay.
If it doesn't
Runs
end,
out of rounds.
yeah. So they're also trying to keep the game going long as well. So having an odd number of players does not hurt this game. It plays just fine, if not more interestingly, actually, with an odd player.
Yeah, it's funny. My initial reaction wasn't strong, but I sort of said on the night, and I sort of stand by this, that I would want to play it again to see if it gets more interesting. My gut reaction was it was doing things that I want. The description of the game was more interesting than the actual playing.
Sure, I can see that.
But it's definitely a very interesting concept.
Yeah, I mean, I think you just have to applaud anything in the space that isn't just a Euro worker placement game, and so it's trying to do weird things. And then if you're streamlining that too. I think A Study in Emerald 2nd Edition is one of my favorite games of all time, but it's also quite complicated and confusing. I'd love to try this.
Yeah, cool. That is Richard the Lionheart.
Thanks for the invite, Neelan. So one of the games that I have played a few times in the last couple of weeks with these guys at Strategicon is nimmt. And that is NIMMT, who can say if I'm saying that right. This is a variant of 6nimmt, which is a fairly popular, lighter card game. This feels most similar to me to a card game like Fuji Flush, where there's almost elements of it being a light party-ish affair where everyone is playing cards numbered, I think, 5 to 100, and you flip them over. You then follow these placement rules, and they go into different piles. But you sometimes don't want your card to go to a specific pile, but it has to, because it's the next number in ascending order. In 6nimmt, this game goes up to, I believe, 6 or 7 players, and there's a bunch of different hops that you can place your cards into. And it's a chaotic mess, right? 6 players play a card face down, flip them over, and then starting in ascending order, you start placing them in these piles, and you never want to be the one that has to play the last card, because then you got to pick up a bunch of cards that are worth negative points. nimmt, and this is a card game I imported from Germany and had to keep looking at the PDF on my phone of the rule book, is a 4-player, more strategic version of 6nimmt. So what this adds is a nimmt row. Every player has an individual row where now they can store cards that don't score points against them, as long as they stay in ascending order. So this game, you have a 3 pile, a 4 pile, and a 5 pile, and those start with a card in them. Everyone plays the card face down. You flip them face up. Whoever's played the lowest card must put their card in the pile that has the least difference between the numbers going upward. And you never want to be on the first pile, the person to play the 3rd card or the 4th card or the 5th card, depending on the pile. If you do, you must take all those cards. So it's kind of a game of each round picking between 6 bad options. However many cards you have in your hand, one of them might be the perfect card that keeps you safe for one round, and then you're super excited. But for the most part, you're like, how can I screw with people? How can I hurt the other players? And also, I'm going to put this card face down and pray.
Right.
There isn't much more to describe about nimmt. I think both 6nimmt and nimmt are fantastic card games that I would highly recommend. This one only goes to 4, which I do believe is a downside. I wish it went higher. What did you guys think of this?
Yeah, I enjoy 6nimmt. I know that there are people who don't, because a lot of people will say, and I think they're probably mostly right, that it is mostly a random affair. I think there is some strategy to it. I don't know if that's accurate or not, but I always felt like there was some strategy to 6nimmt. There's definitely more strategy to nimmt. I'm also with you that I wish it played more. I don't know why it wouldn't be able to play more players, but that's something I always liked about 6nimmt. I like this. I like the added level of strategy. I liked, after our first game, there were ways that I realized that I could have been playing better. It adds enough strategy to make for more interesting decisions, but while still keeping that 6nimmt lightness and quick play. Everybody plays at the same time. I always like games that have that simultaneous action because it moves faster, so you get to keep that. So yeah, I liked it. I'd like to play it again, for sure.
This is one of those games where I think it's definitely undeniable that there is more strategic decision in nimmt than 6nimmt, but to me that almost feels like a bad thing, because I think that there's something I remember being very fun and funny about basically the sheer randomness of 6nimmt. And again, that's not necessarily an educated opinion. I agree that there is probably more strategy to it than I'm giving it credit, but nimmt sort of like, the fundamental idea is this adds a little bit more strategy to it. It didn't still feel enough to overcome a lot of the randomness, because like you're saying, a big part of the game is I'm going to put this out and hope that no one else can sort of beat me to the position that I'm hoping for, right? And, there's obviously strategic decisions that goes into what number that card is and what you think other people have, etc. But it still just didn't feel like it was getting past the fun randomness of the shoutiness of the base game. And I just felt like those highs were higher in Six Nimmt. And to clarify, I haven't played Six Nimmt in a very, very long time, so this might just be, some partly nostalgia. But to me, my gut reaction was I preferred Six Nimmt for being the lighter, sillier game.
This seems, in the words of the immortal Blue Tank, a get good situation, Nealon.
Excuse me, that was the immortal words of the Green Tank.
Oh, was it you? She said something else.
Well, she didn't say that. The immortal words were spoken by the Green Tank, and I can tell you that because I edited the episode. But I appreciate you calling my words immortal.
Yeah, can we leave something in there where I confuse you for my girlfriend? No, I think I've won both times we played together, Nealon. So I do think that the strategy, I agree with you, and that's why I compared it to Fuji Flush, which is a silly card party-ish game where you kind of pretend there's more strategy to it than there is.
Right.
And that is the world that Six Nimmt lives in.
Yeah.
And so the question is, has this turned the dial enough towards a four-player affair where you can win? I think...
Right, and that's what I'm saying is I don't necessarily think it has.
Right, but your assertion was that it hasn't gone far enough, but you also have lost both times. So no. So if it successfully, so the difference, right, is you're saying it's still too random, and now it's less chaotic.
Yes.
What I'm saying is we haven't proven out that it's too random yet because you keep losing.
I absolutely will not disagree that we haven't proven anything by playing 2 games of it where you beat me. I mean,
well, we have proved something. I think you're a little unsure about what we've. It's okay. Let's move on. So that was X Nimmt, but you should also check out Six Nimmt. Great game.
Which one's better?
It's Six Nimmt. Okay, so before we move on, let's have a review. We like to read your reviews out on the show. They're awesomely helpful for us, so please keep sending them. You can do that on Apple Podcasts or on Facebook. If you like what you hear, it does a lot of good for us. It's a really good way to just promote the show. Otherwise, if for whatever reason you don't want to leave a review, just tell a friend about the show. That's also great. Spread the word. That's obviously very, very helpful for us. Let's get into this week's review. It comes from Jub80. I said that weirdly.
Jub.
I think it's hard not to.
So Jub80, that's 80, says...
Way to clarify the 80. I don't know why. It's funny.
You never know.
Jub 18, it's not for you.
Exactly. Come back when you get to 80s level. Board Game Essentials is the title of this review. They say, board gamers often talk about essential games in everyone's collection. Well, this podcast should be in everyone's podcast collection. If you enjoy straight-to-the-point conversations about board games with a nice dose of banter, then listen to these 3 guys talk about our shared hobby. They also have built a small but growing Discord channel. That's at boardgamebarrage.com/Discord.
Boom.
My editorial.
Got it in there.
Which they often engage in. But really, what else does Mark have to do with no job and living at the gym?
That's right.
Play Biblios, I guess.
That's right.
Amazing.
Nice.
That's a great review. Thank you so much. And,
Jub.
And yeah, you did our job for us of promoting the Discord. Please join us over there if you want to hang out with Jub and other fans of the show.
Yeah.
It's a great little community where we talk about board games all day.
And other stuff.
Yeah, totally. There's a bunch of other stuff there, but stay for the board game.
That's right.
The sports channel,
I'm rocking the sports channel right now.
Okay, let's move on to our feature topic, which is going to be a top 5 countdown of games that we thought we were going to hate, but ended up loving. Let's start off by sort of very quickly talking about how we ranked these, what justified a game sort of shooting to the top of your list. Kellen?
Yeah, I think there are specific types of games that I like and mechanisms, and, I mostly dislike Euro games, and so I have my list kind of ranked in order of, the number 1 would be the most surprising. Someone would say, oh, the Red Tank likes that. That doesn't make sense. So that was my criteria.
Okay. For me, it came down to the biggest swing. So for me, it was my number 1 is a game where I thought I wouldn't like it the most, and then it came around and became high on my list. So the greatest variance from where my perceived rank was to where it ended up falling.
Yeah, I think I'm close to... I'm maybe a little bit in between, I'm not sure. Mine isn't necessarily that games that felt like they were outside my wheelhouse, but definitely I may be closer to what Mark was saying, where I wasn't expecting to necessarily like this, and now it's skyrocketed up my list of favorite games.
Yeah.
And so the number 1 represents the biggest gulf between what I was expecting and what I got. Okay, well, let's get straight into it. Kellen, do you want to start us off with your number 5?
Absolutely. I do like social deduction games, but I don't like complicated, annoying, over-the-top, hundreds of rolls. The more you add on to it, the less pure I feel like it is, and the less I enjoy it. So going into my first game of Shadowhunters, my number 5, I really just felt like there was too much going on. There was too much chaos. In Shadowhunters, you are one of 3 factions. You're either the Shadows, the Hunters, or the Neutrals. Everyone gets assigned a role at the beginning of the game, and then you just start killing each other. You have no basis with which, no knowledge, and you just start killing each other. And it has a really clever and unique deck of cards where it has a question on it that says, if you're a hunter, lose 1 life. And then you pass that card to another player, and then you learn some information about what they are or are not. And I think that's such a really fun and interesting system. It feels like about halfway through the game, you finally figure out who someone is after you've already really made your alliances and you've killed someone or almost killed someone for no reason. It's too chaotic. It's too over the top. It just did not seem like something I would like, but every time I played Shadowhunters, I've had a really good time with it. And yeah, it's a social deduction game that we don't talk about very much, but I've definitely played it dozens and dozens of times.
Shadowhunter for me is an interesting game. It sort of feels a little bit like, this is going to be a weird analogy, but it feels a little bit like Splendor and or Codenames. Games where I sort of feel like I'm done with them, and then when I'm forced to play them or just happen to find myself playing them, I realize that I enjoy them more than I thought. This is one that I like.
Have you played?
So Shadowhunters Interesting was actually one of the earliest games I played when I came to the hobby, and we played it a bunch. There was a point where we were playing it every week when I first started playing it. I liked it initially because I was surprised by how interesting it was. This was a point where I was discovering what board games could be, and I fell out a little bit of favor with the inherent randomness in it. Yeah, it's a game that I liked a lot initially, and over the course of playing it a bunch, maybe just got a bit stale for me. Yeah.
Don't mix the character sets. The box tells you not to do it, and you do it anyway. Don't do it.
My number 5 is a game that I hadn't heard of until somebody pulled it out at BarageCon, I think last year or 2 years ago. I can't remember which one. Aside from not knowing much about it, what sort of turned me off were sort of the looks of it. It was very plain. This is Walnut Grove. Didn't know much about it. Sort of looking at the box, it's very standard Euro looking. It's got a cowboy Western theme. And then looking at the back of the box, it's sort of purported to combine elements of Carcassonne with tile laying with Agricola, worker placement and feeding your people. So I wasn't really super excited going into it, and I found that it's combined those 2 games really well. The tile laying is you're sort of building up your farmland and acquiring resources, and there's a lot of interesting decisions in terms of how you're going to place them and what orientation. It really can affect your game. The worker placement is sort of like Agricola level tight. So you want to gather resources, being able to make enough to feed your people always felt difficult to me in a really satisfying way. It's also got a very interesting rondel mechanic, sort of the whole Francis Drake idea where you can get whatever you want or go to whatever worker placement spot you want ahead of you, but you can't go back. So yeah, and it's got a nice engine building thing as well. It combines these Agricola, Carcassonne aspects in a really good way, in a really solid way. So I was very pleasantly surprised by my play of Walnut Grove.
So I thought that I hadn't played Walnut Grove, and then I looked at a picture of the board, and I definitely played with you at BarageCon.
Okay.
That's my opinion.
My number 5 game is Survive Escape for Atlantis. This was a game I also played very, very early in the hobby, and I kind of want to set the scene for this a little bit because this is me discovering, oh my god, games can be amazing. I'm playing Dominion for the first time. Deck building is a thing. You can build a deck while you're playing a game. That's incredible. And then our friend Dean brings out this old game. It looks like it's a 1982 game, and it might have been that old. It's got crumbling corners. It's long. It looks like a Monopoly box.
It might even be a Parker Brothers game.
Oh, it might be. Yeah. It definitely had that sort of I feel about it. It's got this cartoon shark on the front. And I'm just thinking, this looks like a game from the 80s made for kids. And it is. But it's also really, really, really fun. It's total madness. It's very silly. You have a bunch of survivors that each have hidden numbers on the bottom of them. There's an island that's falling apart piece by piece, and you just have to get them to the corners of the board. And your highest point value guy might get eaten by a shark in turn 2, and that sucks for you, but it's part of the fun. It's very silly. It's partly memorizing where your people are because you can't check their values. It's partly sort of rolling a die and hoping you get a shark so you can eat someone else's player. But I actually just played this recently again after years of having not played it in a new edition, I guess, that's been reprinted in the last few years. It's just as silly and funny as I remember it. I really enjoyed it despite expecting it to be just old trash, basically. I mean, I think and to be clear, like, there is this bias that is like you look at an old game, it's like, and you just imagine that it's not possibly going to live up to a modern board game, and I fully acknowledge that I sort of fell for that initially.
Survive is so great. Survive is such a great mean game. I love Survive. Like, I've taught this to a lot of non-gamer friends and they all love it. I've had a couple who bought the game. It's so good. It's really so good and so mean. It's so mean because when you roll the shark or the sea monster or the whale that are like just cause destruction on the board, you control where they go. So you can like form alliances because there's also these boats. The way to get to these corners is to like hop on boats, and whoever has the most meeples on the boat is the captain of the boat and can control it. So you're like, all right, hop on the red boat, let's go. But then, you may know you have your one guy in there and he's like fodder, like you don't even care about him.
Right.
So you just like run him right into a shark or to whatever. It's so good. It is so good. Survive is so good. And this latest version is beautiful.
Yeah.
I cannot recommend Survive enough. It's great.
It's the 30th anniversary edition,
if
I recall correctly.
That's Survive Escape from Atlantis. My number 5.
I'm surprised we haven't played this one together.
Yeah, I guess so, actually.
My number 4 is a game that we have recently talked about, and this is the Great Western Trail. Great Western Trail is perhaps, well, I don't know, I'd have to look at the top list, one of the highest rated Euro games on Board Game Geek. It is a game of cattle farming, still a little unsure of the theme. You are deck building and acquiring cows, and then you are taking them to Kansas City? Somewhere. You're taking them on a route. It is almost devoid of player interaction, but somehow I still find myself thinking about it. And if Neelan begs me to play a Euro game, I would be in it to win it for a Great Western Trail. I'd love to see how the expansion works. I have not gotten to try that yet. I know this is many people's favorite board game right now, or one that they always recommend. And there's sort of different strategies you can pursue, and yeah, it's just a really elegant, for what it is, Euro game.
My number 4 is a game that I thought would be a Ameritrash, sort of big plastic pieces and not really much to it. So this is Blood Rage. I was not in on the whole Blood Rage Kickstarter hype. I didn't get to Blood Rage until well after, and I was reluctant to go into it just because I just thought it was, again, like Kickstarter hype, lots of plastic, like not much to it. So very late in playing Blood Rage, and yeah, once I played it, the sort of Euro aspects, more like area control aspects, the engine building, combined with the plastic, which accentuated like the fun I was having from these other aspects, really turned me around on it. And I remember introducing it to Eurogame friends who were skeptical as well, and they also were very pleasantly surprised and really got into it. So yeah, that's my number 4, Blood Rage.
I am so bad at Blood Rage because the idea that everyone starts with the same clan, but you can draft upgrade cards that give you special powers.
Yeah.
It's like, should I score points or should I upgrade my clan?
Right.
It's like in the third age, I'm like, well, I'm going to upgrade. I'm supposed to be scoring points right now, but I'm going to have the most powers of anyone at this table.
Right.
My number 4 game is Formula D, or Formula Day, which I believe is the original game.
There's an elephant version, Formula
E.
I thought it was G.
An elephant version of Formula D?
Yeah, there is.
I need this. So this was a game that was sort of a friend sort of brought out and was like, we should try this. And the theme car racing is not really my jam. And then he sort of described it as rolling dice, and then it sort of rolled my eyes a little bit because it is basically a roll to move game. But it's a really, really good roll-to-move game. The basic premise is you have a little car that has sort of a very amount of damage to like your engines and gears. Like you have little trackers that represent the wear on them. As you're going around a track, you sort of start in gear 1, and you can choose to shift up and down. And depending on what gear you're in, you roll a different sort of size die. So you start off with just like a small little D6 maybe, and then so if you get to gear 2 and you're rolling a D10, and your swing between sort of values that you can move on the track gets bigger as you go up in gear. So you sort of have to manage shifting up and down because you sort of get to these corners in the track where you have to stop a certain number of times. So as you're approaching a corner, you can't just keep rolling the big die because if you just bust through that corner, you sort of take a ton of damage to your car. So it's about managing the damage you have, deciding the appropriate time to shift up and down with just a little bit of sort of roll and move randomness thrown in there, but just enough that's still fun because you sometimes want to take big risks. You're like, okay, I'm definitely going to get through this corner without a problem, so I'm going to stay in this gear. And then you overshoot it, and that's funny, and it has a lot of great moments like that. And by virtue of just being a pure race game, like just get to the end of this track first, it's simple to explain, and everyone's on board with the premise from the get-go. And yeah, that's Formula D.
Yeah, I really like this one.
My number 3, induction, logic, puzzles, all of that is not stuff I'm interested in at all. So it is quite the surprise for me that Zendo has quickly become one of my favorite games of the past year and of perhaps all time. I think it will definitely make the list this upcoming season. Zendo, we have talked about it a few times, but I just enjoy it. Essentially strips away the fact that you're playing a game similar to like a party game like Concept. It's more of just an activity that you do together, but one player has a rule that they make buildings. The rule is a red piece must touch 2 yellow pieces, and then you make an example of what that looks like and an example of what it doesn't look like, and then everyone just has to build buildings and try to guess and figure out what that rule is. First person to guess the rule wins. There's more rules involved, but that's the basic structure. It is a peaceful game. It is a relaxing game, but it is also one where you're just staring at the table and looking at everything and racking your brain and trying to come up with the solution. And that type of logic and inference, I don't even know if I'm using the right Mensa words, as it were, but this is outside my wheelhouse 100%, but is such a good board game and feels like nothing else.
My number 3, I was sort of turned off by the blandness of the box. I'm a big fan of Euro games, but this just seemed so dry, and it's an older game, so I just thought it must have been surpassed. This is Hansa Teutonica. But once we started playing it, I was just blown away. I just don't understand. There are so many mechanics or aspects of games that get iterated upon that you would just expect that you couldn't play, one of these much older games, much drier games, and see things that you hadn't seen in newer games. But Hansa Teutonica is just such a great, tight, elegant, and I know those are cliche words, but they're so true, Euro. Very aggressive in terms of blocking people and forcing them to score points for you. The rule set is very simple, yet incredibly interesting. It feels like to me that there are different ways to approach it. There are different strategies that are all quite disparate. It feels like a game I would want to replay any number of times and I would enjoy over and over again. So yeah, Hansa Teutonica, a classic, and for good reason. And I was just turned off by how bland everything is about it, but it's certainly worth it.
They're redoing this, aren't they?
There's talk they're going to redo it with a gangster theme. Yeah, I don't know if it's been confirmed, but I know the designer Stedding is in some level of like working on it, but I don't know if it's been confirmed yet.
I really want to play this. I've been hearing so much good about it for a while. Okay, my number 3 game is In the Year of the Dragon. This is a game where I had played a bunch of Felds at that point, and for whatever reason, I'm not that averse to point salads, which is, I think, the chief argument against a lot of Feld's designs. But having played Bruges, having played Castles of Burgundy, and others I'm forgetting, none of them was really clicking for me. Oracle of Delphi I had liked a lot, but it also felt a little bit outside of his wheelhouse, a little bit weirder. So when In the Year of the Dragon was broken out and I was told it's a Feld game, and also apparently one of the less well-loved Feld games, I was very apprehensive. The game has a very brown box Euro, like you describe Hansa Teutonica, just kind of a boring look to it. And then you get through the rules explanation and you're kind of saying like, oh, everyone dies.
Yeah.
Like, if you do this person dies. If you do that person dies. I'm thinking this is going to be miserable.
Right.
And it is.
Right.
I want to clarify that. This is a miserable game to play, but I couldn't stop thinking about it.
Yeah.
When Mark and I went back to the next game, we played it again at the very next time because I was so just into the idea of everything I was doing. Everything is just like so harsh, but it's just so tight. And there's so much you want to do and you can't do all of it. And then weighing the options of like giving up people, basically sacrificing them to their horrible death just so you can make more room in your palace for better people. Like, it's such a horrible thing,
right?
But it's very satisfying as a puzzle, and I really, really enjoyed it.
Yeah.
It is to date my favorite Feld game. That is In the Year of the Dragon.
Yeah, I really like this one as well. Yeah.
My number 2 game. This one, I don't know why I expected it to be so bad. And I think it actually was because it is compared to Splendor all the time. Anytime a card or a small game comes out and says, this is the Splendor killer, I just get annoyed, A, and B, no, because Splendor is awesome. This is Majesty for the Realm. This is a very small box game. It has cute meeples in it, has adorable artwork. It's hard to even articulate why I like this, but I bring it out whenever I'm looking for something under 30 minutes. All you're doing is you're playing, I believe, 12 cards. I believe you both have played this.
I've played it, absolutely.
But my love for it, I think, way surpasses yours, unless you liked it.
I liked it a lot. I certainly liked it a lot.
I'm trying to remember if I've played this, to be honest.
Yeah, so you play a knight, and then if everybody doesn't have a defender card already out, they're going to lose one of their cards. And so then you play a grain man, and so you're doing different types of cards that combo together. The deeper you go into a color, the more extra points you're going to score, but you also want to spread out. And there are different buildings that you can use per game, and it just has that light, inoffensive, you get through it really quick, but make some interesting decisions. And that is Majesty for the Realm.
Yeah, I really like how it's got the Splendor sort of idea. Like it's like a light engine builder where you feel like you're ramping up. Like toward the end of the game, you feel like you're comboing off a lot of points, and that's a really cool aspect of it. Yeah, I like this one.
Yeah, but based on your description, I do remember playing this. I feel like I remember liking it.
My number 2 shared a lot of the same apprehensions I had with my number 4, Blood Rage. I felt like this game was being compared more than I wanted to games like Eldritch Horror and Arkham Horror, which I'm not a huge fan of. This is Mansions of Madness 2nd Edition. And it's also got app integration, which has been hit or miss in my experience. But this game is fantastic. The app integration is perfect. It's just about as well done as I've ever seen. All my plays of it have been very exciting, very fun. A lot of like cheering at the table. I mentioned a story in, I think when we did our top 50, of a moment where there was a player who'd gone insane, and we thought the insanity was benign until at the very last moment she stabbed our one survivor to win the game. And it was just one of like the highlight moments of board gaming in my life. Like I remember that moment so clearly, and everybody just laughing when it happened. This is just a fantastic game. It's like a great Halloween, turn out the lights, dice chucking, just like spooky sort of like ambiance game. It's great. It's absolutely great. Mansions of Madness 2nd Edition.
My number 2 game, I think, is going to be a little bit of a surprise, and it's maybe higher up on this list than it should be, to be honest, because I've only played it once, but it's Chicken Caesar. So we played this at BarageCon, I think the first BarageCon 2 years ago. Yeah. It was fairly early in the morning. Like I think I had just gotten up and I sort of stumbled into the kitchen. I'm a not very much of a morning person. And Mark is setting up this game, and it's called Chicken Caesar, which is like this hybrid chicken Roman theme, right, I guess. Of course. Which is chickens I'm way in on, but like Rome less so.
You are way in it.
Yeah.
I'm going to talk to you about that.
So like something about just the premise of this was just like weird and unsettling. And then as Mark's describing, it's like, oh, you're moving up through the Senate. I'm just going like, oh, I've made a mistake. I'm going to go back to bed. And then everything is kind of this flat white color, and you have little chicken people that are, I guess they're chicken people. I guess you're advancing through a coop.
They're chicken senators.
Yeah, okay, chicken senators, sorry. And like one is your first chicken, and then they're descendants of chickens, and then right. You want to leave a legacy for the rest of your chickens.
Right, of course.
And everything about this sounds ridiculous, but it's almost a pure like negotiation voting game, and I love those. And I was so pleasantly surprised by how much I liked it. Enough so that it's actually weirdly, of all the games that we've played over the years, I keep thinking about this one. I keep being like,
of course you do,
it's all about chickens.
I could have told you to be obsessed with it.
Yeah, exactly. My love of chickens keeps bringing me back to Chicken Caesar, which I do you still have this?
I do still have it.
We should play Chicken Caesar again.
Chicken Caesar. Did you play it, Colin?
I did play it. I remember loving a lot of the individual moments and kind of just being overwhelmed with how ridiculous it was.
Yeah.
I'm surprised it made that well. I mean,
I don't know why it did, to be perfectly honest. You're posting chickens to defend against the foxes. It's so good.
The man loves his chickens. Don't question him. Just let him be.
Got it.
Let me enjoy this theme.
All right, Neal's going to go back to eating eggs now.
That is my number 2 game, Chicken Caesar.
My number 1 game that I enjoy that I did not think I would enjoy by virtue of it being a long, dry, uninteractive Euro game is Yokohama. Yokohama it had one thing going for it, which is that it's set in Japan, which everyone knows I am a weeboo. But Yokohama is essentially Istanbul cranked to 17. It is extremely annoying to set up. It's fiddly. There's a ton of cards. There's a ton of iconography that's half in English, half in Japanese, for no apparent reason, even in the English version of the game. But it is a very, very elegant game of trying to plan your turn. And it uses that same thing in Istanbul where you go, you're in this bustling port. Yokohama is a port city in Japan. And where you go is physically restricted to where your meeple is. You can only go so far, and you can only go on certain routes. And there's something that I just love about that mechanism, because a lot of Euro games, the randomness comes from your objectives, perhaps. And there are random objectives in Yokohama as well. But what action is going to be more impactful this game may depend on where it is in the port. And having to look at the board and try to figure out where you're going to go, it's just fun to think about. And I just always think about playing more Yokohama, which is great because I got the deluxe version coming on Kickstarter. But when I express love for this game, it's the one that people most frequently go, "You like Yokohama?" ? And that is why it has the number one spot on my list. It's a very interesting game. Have you Yokohama?
I have not played Yokohama.
Well, when we get it, we'll play it.
Let's do it. I'm excited. My number one game sort of harkens back to the same issues I had with Hansa Teutonica. Very bland cover, very old game, but now a game that is certainly among my favorites. This is Caylus. This is known as one of the first worker placement games. It's a game that doesn't have a lot of variability. There's not much randomness to setting up the board. When you're building buildings in Caylus, you can build from any of the buildings, and there's no buildings that are taken out. So basically, every time you play it, you know exactly which buildings you can build. You know exactly like how the route's going to be. But it is so tight and mean and just such a great design. I absolutely love Caylus. It took me a long time to get to it. I just assumed that worker placement, like the first worker placement game, like, and obviously the first and highly regarded. In this time, it was very highly regarded. So obviously it had some level of gravitas, but like worker placement has been done so many times. How could it still be fresh? But I so distinctly remember wrapping up my first game at Caylus and just thinking like this game could have been released yesterday, and I would not have been surprised. It is so good. Such a tight, mean worker placement game. There's so many moments of Caylus where you put a worker down in a spot where you can manipulate the fortunes of the other players, and like you just know, and they know that like their ability to like do what they want is in your hands, and it's just so sweet. Caylus is such a great game. I absolutely love it. Have you guys played Caylus?
I haven't. I really want to. Yeah. I mean, it's one of those games that our friend that hosts game nights regularly has had on his shelf for all the 8 years that I've been there, and I've never once played it. And after you sort of described it, the many times you have, I was like, I have to play this.
Good.
It sounds great.
Good.
I played it once, and it was many years ago, and was always intrigued by the provost.
Yeah.
Is that how you say that word?
Yeah, exactly.
Where you can continually build buildings to get you more powers and more interesting stuff.
Right.
But if the provost goes past you...
Right. So basically, you're placing your workers on a road, and every time you place a worker, you have to pay for that worker. And money is like crazy tight. It's crazy. So you're basically like, it's such an investment to place a worker. But then the workers fire off down this road where you're building buildings up until the provost. So you can try to like fire off a building that is past the provost, and then you have to engineer it so that the provost moves past that building. But every round, players can pay money to move the provost back. And it's just like, it's all about like when you pass, because that determines when you're able to move the provost. So like, it's just so negotiating-y and like so mean.
So that is my question. If I recall correctly, and I want to do this again, the group that I played it with was very adamant that I not negotiate moving the provost.
Right.
Because I wanted to really like, I was like, well, if the three of us all band together, we're going to screw Mark.
I play with no rule about negotiating or not negotiating. I think in practice, you don't negotiate that much, but you certainly can. And it's just like when you desperately need the space in front of the provost, and then somebody places their worker on the spot that gives you basically free manipulation of the provost, and like you have to like now work with that guy or like place based on where he's placing. It's such a great feeling. It's such a excruciating or powerful feeling when you're the placer of the controller of the provost, or when you have to like, you're at that person's will, basically. It's so great. It's such a great game. And that's my number one game, Caylus.
My number one game is a game by the one and only true living doctor. Is that right, Callan?
Only true living.
Only true and living doctor. I'm sorry. Dr. Reiner Knizia. This is Blue Lagoon. And this was a game that I somehow missed the hype on. And it wasn't a game I was anticipating.
Yeah, and I remember when we got it at Gen Con, you read the rules and thought there wasn't much to it.
That's exactly it, yeah. So, because it was almost just like given to me, it's like, okay, yeah, maybe read this and see if there's anything to it. And I read the rules and I was like, I think this is going to be bad, guys. Like, because for a couple of reasons. Like, it's a beautiful game, but it's not like a thematic game in any sense. It's a lot more abstract than games I typically like. Like, I typically bounce off of abstract games pretty quickly. Blue Lagoon I played once and was intrigued by it, and then from the second time onwards, it like skyrocketed up my list. I think it's in my top 20 or close right now, which, for a game from last year is incredible. I love everything about Blue Lagoon. It's got just the right amount of like meanness and interaction. You have to be looking what other people are doing to block their plans. There are multiple different sort of routes, objectives you can sort of pursue in order to score. It has this very interesting sort of two-staged gameplay where the first half almost completely wipes, except for these huts you've set up that are the starting points for the second phase. So you score it each phase like completely separately and just add your scores together. It's weird and it's just novel, but so good. This has almost become the game that if you're sort of like half into the hobby, you're a little bit past the gateway stage, but I'm like, this is the game you have to get. Like, if you're a 2-player, if you're a 3-player, like I can't think of a better sort of easy to learn, but you're going to get so much reward over the long tail of this. Yeah, I love it.
Blue Lagoon is a game that I've played I think 6 or 7 times. I have never won. And yet, every time I play it, I want to play it again. I love this game, and I'm terrible at it, but I love it. I really love it. This is, one of my favorites.
For some reason, I always remember the specific game where I was playing with new players, and they didn't realize how important building the route around all the islands was, and so I destroyed them. Okay, that's the end of the story. I won. But the entire game, I assumed all 3 other players knew how important the island was, and I kept thinking they were like deliberately blocking me, and I'm like, oh dang, like how dare you, dude, like, oh man, why did you go there? But then at the end of the game, all 3 of them were like, oh, I completely ignored that.
Yeah.
And I was just like, that was a lot of internal tension I had.
That's Blue Lagoon, a fantastic game that I would heartily recommend. That is my number one, and that is going to be it for the end of our top 5 countdown of games we thought we were going to hate. Thank you so much for listening to the episode. As always, if you would like to reach us, please email us at boardgamebarrage@gmail.com. You can email your questions and comments and suggestions there. Join us on the Discord. That's at boardgamebarrage.com/Discord if you want to talk with other fans of the show who are just really, really into board games. And as always, thank you to Heart Society for letting us use their song What's on Your Mind, Kid as our intro and outro music. And that's it. We're out. Goodbye.
Bye-bye.
Bye. You're live.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode number 71 of the Board Game Barrage. Whoa, I just forgot the name of the podcast. Okay.
What?
I literally I started saying Barrage. I'm like, wait, no, that's not it. Wait, no,
it couldn't be Barrage.
It is. Yeah, that was so weird. Okay, let's do that again.
I love having an end of clips.
Very obvious outro clip. Okay.
We have a giant chart.
Okay.
Of like, like a final, what is it, Sweet 16? What are they? No, it's not Sweet 16. Dear God.
16?
March Madness. Yeah. Is it Sweet 16?
Yeah, it gets us.
I thought that was your birthday party.
Nice.
No, I'm not joking. It's not a joke.
Oh, Sweet 16 is also, yeah.
It's both?
Wait, isn't it Sweet 16?
Well, Sweet 16 is the birthday party.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah,
but what do they call
Sweet 16.
the 16?
Yeah, Sweet 16.
Okay, anyway.
You got me confused now.
No, I'm confused.
Yeah.
This can't go in. I'm confused. But
I'm trying, like, it's funny because you got me in my head about like what I'm trying to actually say, because I feel like because I felt pretty clear on what I was trying to say, but then now I'm not so sure.
I'd have to go back.
That's a Cullen move.
What?
Make you confused about what you just said.
Yeah, exactly. Unsure about what I think. Okay, let's see. I wanted to organize.